Okay, Professor, I know facial hair is not something you're supposed to talk about in a polite society, but because of your comments last week, I was going to shave and I was going to make my mustache all impressive
Yeah,
and
I
I
don't.
forgot.
Oh well, that's all
You don't
right.
care.
I forgot
Yeah.
what I said about your facial hair last 2 weeks. So,
Yeah, you say I'm a mess sometimes. You'll go, hey, is
oh
John going to show up, just finished running, or what's he done this time? Yeah.
yeah,
So enough of faux pas and mistakes in the world of podcasting. I'm perfect, I'm sure. Professor, why do you think I want to talk about culture and laws, comparing and contrasting today? And I'll tell you, it's not a trick question. There's no way you'd know. But do you have any guesses?
no, I have no guesses. I
Well,
never
sure. It
know.
was the new. You should know. It was the press secretary
Oh,
yesterday who announced fairly authoritatively, by the way. And I don't have a beef to grind against her. I think she's actually okay and seems to be, well spoken. And boy, she's insistent though. I wish I was that confident when I was that young. She's really confident. And I was that confident when I was young, actually, probably. But anyway, she said, "You misunderstand the question." This is on immigration. You
hmm.
misunderstand the question. If they are an illegal immigrant, they are a criminal. They should be deported. And then the reporter immediately said, well, yeah, but how many of them are criminals? Like have done some other kind of criminal behavior. And she goes, you don't understand. This is a cultural issue that the last administration didn't believe in. We believe, this administration believes that if you're an illegal immigrant, you are a criminal and therefore will be deported. Every one of them. And I applaud the authoritative statement. I actually can understand if that's the position of President Trump and his entire administration, not only legally, and we should ask Bart this, but she's saying culturally, we all need to believe that they are criminals and need to be deported. And I figured that was a good thing for us to kind of think through as in society. There's other reasons I wanted to talk, but that just crystallized it to me that I don't think Americans really think of the differences between law and culture very much. And so I'd
Hmm.
like to get some of your historical perspectives. You've given and I'll stop talking in a second. You've given a wonderful analysis several times about culturally what happened that changed slavery. Sure, it was an election and democracy happened and there was lots of laws but you argue that it was not only culturally that made Lincoln happen, but culturally in the founding of our country, most decent people believed in the dignity of the human spirit, and it's not a law made, it's a God made, it's a decency, it's a common sense, it's culturally important that there's not slavery. And there's reasons that people like slavery, economics and cruelty, but the bottom line is yes, that was a part of our country, but just a part. The majority of our country believed in the Declaration of Independence. Anyway, so I've given you lots of things to hang on to. Will you talk to me either about slavery or immigration or major cultural changes that led to laws or the other major what we've been talking about for the first 11 days of the Trump administration is anti-DEI, left, right, and the other thing. And you've had a lot of experience in that. So you can start wherever you want, and then I'll try to follow your lead.
Well, you're right. I had no idea where you were going with this, and now could probably just monologue for an hour
Good.
on,
I'll interrupt.
on this question because you brought up so many really interesting and important points that are all things that are useful and applicable in many other contexts. So,
Well, let's share this video out after a while. Let's get some people to
yeah.
pay attention to it. Why don't you give
So,
a speech, so to
so
speak?
I don't know if you've ever heard the expression that politics is downstream of culture or
Mm,
law, and I've always sort of grouped politics and law together in the following sense, which is that if um, politics and law are meant to handle things in a proverbial way. If you think about the book of Proverbs, what is proverbial wisdom? Proverbial wisdom is stuff that's usually true, and so we do a pretty good job of setting up a set of rules to handle how most people need to live. Um, And then we have to also have a system for the edge cases, the onesies and twosies that don't fall into
So let me interrupt.
predictable patterns. Yeah.
Remember your train of thought if you can, and I'm going to interrupt a variety of times, so it's going to be difficult on you.
Yeah, no, I know where I'm going. Yeah.
The obnoxious student in your classroom, me.
That's fine.
So proverbial laws are likely to be very similar in all 50 states because it makes sense.
Well, I'm just saying, like, we need to have a speed limit, because under normal circumstances, if the speed limit is 45, that's that's a good speed limit. But if somebody is going over 45 and they have a good reason, well, we need to put that in front of a jury because we need to throw some common sense at this standard, this that is inflexible. And so, the 45 mile an hour speed limit is the speed limit for what things should be. 999 out of 1,000 times, what you should be doing is going 45 in a 45. Does that
I
make sense?
don't want to take you off point, but I
Yeah.
think you're wrong. There's lots of cities that have a speed limit just to get revenue and has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the appropriate speed. And
I
there's
would
lots
say
of
that is a bad use of law
fair enough.
because what I'm saying is that law and politics should reflect culture. That it is and should be downstream of culture. The reason that speed limit should be 45 is because that's what is safe for the people who live there, not to generate revenue.
Okay,
So
one more interruption.
yeah, go ahead.
Um, there's tremendous differences between urbanized areas of our country and the wild west of Idaho, Montana, and parts of much of Colorado.
Sure.
And so it really doesn't need to be a 45 or actually 65. It's fine that Montana has no speed limit, or maybe they have a 90. I can't remember. I haven't been in Montana, but we don't need a national speed limit law, do we? Can't we have a proverbial law that generally what you say, but if some states want it higher or lower, isn't that fine? Or you're arguing for national speed limit laws?
Well, are you saying their legality or their efficacy?
I'm trying to take your argument about some things are so standard, proverbial law, that they are generally the same. And I think there's regional differences around the country and the world that we don't need to regulate everything worldwide the same.
Well, I would just say it this way: if it's an interstate highway paid for with federal money, they can make the speed limit whatever they want.
Okay, fair enough. You're being
Because,
stubborn. Fair enough.
because the
Going
person
with you.
who's paying for it gets to override
Fair enough. Keep
the
going with your themes.
yeah. So my point is that there's this intersection where laws are most effective when they actually reflect the culture of the people, and that's why we sometimes say that the American Revolution is a conservative revolution, and I don't mean that it's a revolution for conservatives, but when it took place, the American Revolution took place because um, um, people are willing to fight for rights that they already have. It didn't invent any new rights. And that is always seen as the difference between the American Revolution and almost every other revolution that took place after the American Revolution, is that we already had a culture of following a certain set of beliefs. And it was when the British tried to interrupt what we already had that we were willing to rebel and substitute and the what was on paper with Great Britain with a revolution reflecting how the rights Americans thought they already had.
So,
And
Professor,
yeah, go
the
ahead.
the Queen of England, from my superficial research, is one of the most her family, not just or now King of England, um, is one of the wealthiest families in the world. I mean, they are really wealthy, not superficially wealthy. I mean, they own land that major metropolitan suburbs sit on. They are landowners all across America, by example. And for some reason, the English still like having the monarchy. That's a cultural reason, right? Which is alien to me. I don't want a king or a queen. I have zero desire to have a king or a queen. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, right, but by my example, if enough English people decided that they didn't want to have a king or a queen, and say that if it got up to like 80-90% of Englishmen thought we should get rid of the monarchy, and yet the monarchy still existed, what you would expect is that eventually the law would change. that the culture of that people would compel the laws to change, because the laws are so far out of whack with what people believe. And this was a particular issue because of the issue of both slavery and then the Civil War and the years coming out of the Civil War. Because and this is why Ulysses S. Grant is probably the president who made the strongest statement on behalf of rule of law. He said, "I know of no method to, compel the repeal of a bad law so effective as its stringent execution." Meaning, what I'm gonna do as president is I'm gonna enforce all the laws. And he said, without regard to, fear or local prejudice. And I'm going to enforce every part of every law in every part of our common country. And if you think these laws are bad, you need to change the laws. But I'm going to enforce all of the laws, once they go through the process. And he actually in his inaugural address, he actually walked them through the process. He said, "Here's what I'm going to do as president. I'm going to give advice to Congress on what I think a good law will be."
And
And
culturally, how did people react to that?
well, it was all interesting because Grant was one of the few people who made almost no promises before he was elected, and he didn't let anybody see his inaugural address. He wrote it himself. So absolutely nobody knew what was going to be in his inaugural address.
Wow.
So everybody was like, "I wonder how Grant's going to govern." And so his inaugural address really did explain, "This is how I'm going to govern."
So did Congress then
No,
start to change laws?
he said, if and he was kind of giving a little miniature civics lesson in one paragraph. He said, "I'm going to give advice to Congress, and then if they pass a law that I don't like, I'll veto it. But I have no power to deny the expressed will of the people through Congress. So I'm going to enforce every law that comes out of Congress, whether I like it or not, and
Well,
whether you like it or not."
it's interesting that some things never change then. That's exactly what Trump did with TikTok.
No, no,
What?
no. And I would say we've never had three presidents in a row so unlike, President Grant, because in essence, well, sometimes we blame it on Clinton or, but um, Clinton was kind of the one who figured out that if he won on a technicality, that his supporters were willing to uh, defend that technicality. In other words, they say, "Oh, it's the economy, stupid," right? Or "Hey, you say you're gonna put 100,000 policemen on the streets, but that won't actually do anything about crime." And he was like, "Yeah, so what?" How incredibly cynical that is. Or to say we're going to put 100,000 teachers in the classrooms, and people are like, "Well, that's not going to do anything," but the pollster said it doesn't matter. It sounds like a big number that's going to do something, and he did it anyway. And then when the campaign rolls around, say, "Well, he's tough on crime. He hired 100,000 cops," knowing that has nothing to do with him, actually, changing policing or teaching. And then, during his various, legal issues, saying, "Oh, it depends on what the word is," and then having people say, "Oh, he's a genius," instead of, "Oh, come on," right? He's lying. So we sort of blame Clinton a little bit for this, but really it was President Obama who said, "Well, I'm going to essentially approach this and I'm going to make the argument that sounds reasonable, because in every single county there's a district attorney, and you can't prosecute every single crime that takes place in your county." And so, yeah,
Prosecutorial discretion as far as
exactly. And so
chapter.
he said, "Well, I'm just going to use my prosecutorial discretion, and it just so happens I'm only going to enforce the laws that I like. And that's, that's not really how DAs are supposed to prioritize crime. But and then
Occasionally, the street cop, the traffic cop, can look at the instance and make an observation firsthand. Yeah,
yes.
I'm going to give this person a warning because they look credible. They're not breaking the law. It wasn't egregious. And they give prosecutorial discretion. And we probably would encourage that in
Right.
society.
And God bless every single policeman who ever gave somebody a warning, right?
Yeah,
I think there's a special place in heaven for
right.
every single policeman who ever issued a warning instead of a
I
citation.
appreciate that. And I'm also mad at the two that didn't.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
yes.
Uh, but
Okay, so keep going.
oh, okay. So
Wait, and
at
all
any
this
rate,
stuff going hold on, Professor, I guess
yeah,
I
sorry.
interrupt you before you keep going. Out of everything that's going on in society right now, you have liberal friends that are just scared to death. And you
Yeah.
probably have some trans friends and some immigrant friends and some DEI people. I mean, everything that's going on, and you decide to criticize Clinton and Obama. Really?
Well, I would say if this is the stew, this is
Yeah, please keep
the
going.
this is the stew that they cooked up that they were willing to overlook, and now yeah, and then of course Biden took everything, and well, Trump did it, and then Biden did it, and now Trump's doing it again. So
Well, admittedly, we're a conservative show, so I want you to be conservative. But if I'm a liberal listening to this show, I hit my head and go, "Oh my God, he's criticizing by Obama and Clinton, and then he even gets called out from his buddy John, and then he criticizes Biden. What? Really? I mean, is that where we're at right now?
well, I would just say this: what I am criticizing is the idea that it's okay to break the law if for your friends,
Oh, okay. Criticize.
that
Yeah.
you can't just that or how about this? I saw defend the republic. I saw that uh, Liz Cheney mentioned that a note her father once sent her that said, defend the republic, and I thought, um, I, I like that as an admonition from a father to a daughter. So I would just simply say, um, if when you advocate for the destruction of the system, I'm going to be a critic of that.
Good.
I'm going to defend the republic, and I'm
So,
going to be a critic of that when Clinton did it, and when Obama did it, and when Trump did it, and when Biden did it, and now that Trump's doing it again. Because what I believe that we've had is a series of presidents who have not defended the republic.
love that. So on the street analogy again, before you take a big picture and keep going, on the street analogy, if a cop, or actually more a sheriff's deputy, more likely, but if a sheriff's deputy gives a warning to only white people passing through the county, his
Yeah,
friends, so to speak, or versa, a black sheriff's deputy and only letting black folks go through, that would just be an egregious, horrible situation in society. If
yeah,
they're doing it because they look rational and they're law abiding and it was a mistake, great. If they're doing it for cultural inappropriate, not even inappropriate, for racist reasons,
yeah, yeah.
then it's
No,
really bad.
and by the way, don't expect normal people to go along with whatever your garbage argument is for why you only gave tickets to black people. We're not going to believe you. You're not
Keep
going to
going.
win on a technicality, right? And by the same token, if we look at a survey of the every single anthropology department in the United States, and they have zero Republicans, don't tell me that you're not discriminating against Republicans. You are. Like, I don't care. I'm not all of your, oh, but technically this or maybe that. Like, no, like the result has been discrimination. You,
Okay, so
I'm not
let's
going to
just
listen to any of your fancy words.
let's cut to the chase then, and be
Yeah.
careful you don't get yourself in trouble. I know you have tenure and all, but still, you're a friend, and I want to
Well, I'm
protect
not
you.
even sure what I've
Yeah,
said.
I'm about ready to drill you.
Okay.
So anyway,
All
yeah.
right.
So
Yeah.
don't answer or demur if you'd like. You've been a pretty strong critic of some some, or maybe most, or even maybe all in California. I don't know if you're an expert worldwide, but on some DEI policies. So the simple question, I just want to make sure you don't get yourself in trouble. The simple question is, you just must be thrilled with what President Trump is doing. I mean, in every department and every agency, and route them out and report on others, and don't have a single sign of it anywhere. We're going to completely abolish anything that says diversity, equity, or inclusion, or the manifestations or actions thereof, in every department or anybody that wants to do business. And we're going to sue, and we're going to have people report, and we're going to have you sign pledges, and we're going to demand that you retire. I mean, just in every, I've been pretty impressed with how, I didn't know that this was the issue. I truly did not know this was the number one issue coming out of the administration this year. And I've been discussing it with friends, and they say I'm ignorant or I haven't been paying attention. I pay a lot of attention. And I am surprised at the depth and breadth of anti DEI policy from the administration and how adamant they seem to be. So it doesn't have to be current events totally. Take us back through history too. Is the time right now? I mean, the Supreme Court's ruled affirmative action's illegal, at least in, it. Take us through your thought process on cultural versus law.
Well, how about this? I'll say what I'm against without using the word diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Great.
The first thing I would like to say is I have no idea everything that the Trump administration is doing. And so I can't say whether what they're doing is justified or not. Here's what I'm against. I'm against people who believe that violence is always justified.
Love this.
That we must organize society by race.
Love
that
that.
we must have a racial hierarchy, that
Agreed.
power is all that matters, that no dissent can be tolerated, and we must destroy the United States of America. So that's
what was the last one? I was breathing too hard. What was the last one?
We must destroy the United States of America.
Well, no one believes in that.
Yes, they do.
Really?
Yes. And so when if somebody wants to give that set of beliefs a different name, I'm all ears. But what it is called by many people is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So without knowing all the details, I've only read 3/4 of the new and old president's executive orders. So I'm a subject matter expert. Of course I'm not, but I'm pretty in tune what's gone on in that last 11 days. And they are crazy intentional of striking what they believe is what you just said. I think they are truly culturally angry, and they've been angry about this a long time. And they finally have a president that's willing to not just pander, to actually butcher knife this and stab it with a surgical knife, and then take a chainsaw and little tiny paring knives. They're willing to do whatever they need to totally eradicate this from society. Just believe me on this. They are really, I can show you some letters that employees for federal agencies are getting. Man, that's really intense. You can't celebrate Women's Month or Gay Month, or, I mean, you just can't.
Yeah, none of those things have anything to do with what I just said.
Okay, keep going then. Explain a little bit.
Like, and I think that what is often happening is activists within agencies will then take an outrageous action in order to publicize or in order to create a protest. So they'll say, oh, you want to do this? We're going to get rid of the discussion of the Tuskegee Airmen. And then they have to come back and say, that's not what we told you to do. Right. Or, don't celebrate Pride Month. And he's like, we've been ordered by the federal government. Well, have you really, or are you just trying to get attention? This happens all the time. I was talking about this with one of my friends yesterday with book bans. Everybody says, they have their banned books months, and they, and then you do a little bit of investigating, and it turns out that none of these books have been banned, like
you just have to go to the librarian to check it out rather than being on the shelf.
Right. Or some parent wrote a letter saying they didn't want their particular child to see a particular book or something, so I will not defend the Trump administration. Let's remember our 2 rules for the Trump administration, from last week, which is you should never underestimate how random and capricious his decision making is, and you can never predict what the results of that randomness will be when it comes to actual policy. So I don't defend Trump, and I don't defend the activists. I will stick by what I,
Did
you
you
know.
those 5 or 6 little points of what you believe in or will fight against or fight for and against? Do you have that in your head? Have you written a speech on that, or is that in a document, or you just make that up right now?
Well, I sort of, I mean, I was heavily influenced by this book by a guy named Yasha Monk. And he's a leftist, former communist, or his parents are communists, and maybe so he's not a conservative by any stretch, but he did a really good job of explaining the fairly good origins of each of these ideas. And the book is called The Identity Trap. And if you look at the origin of all of these very bad ideas that come out as DEI, they all have a very good origin. Coming out of World War II, you had a bunch of Nazis and communists who said, well, we should be more skeptical of people who make grand truth claims. And like, okay, good. That becomes postmodernism, but then it becomes there is no truth. and and you can say that the Holocaust didn't happen. Like, it started good, right? We shouldn't have listened to Nazis is a message I can get behind, right? The next thing is that when World War II was over, there were still a lot of colonial powers, France, for instance, that were trying to hold on to their former colonies. I'm not a big fan of colonialism, and people rebelling against their colonial oppressors often used violence in order to win their freedom. I'm also pretty sympathetic to that. So that became post-colonialism. But where I get off, where I stop is when you say that the use of violence is good. You shouldn't need to use violence within a democratic system. If you are appealing to
Especially a constitutional republic, even more than a
any
democratic.
kind of constitutional republic, nonviolent protest is far more effective. So I would say if you are a colony trying to overthrow a totalitarian dictatorship or something like that, then yeah, but no, not against some sort of constitutional republic. So again, starts with a good idea, right? But the sort of dumb version is that violence is good. So now there's no truth, violence is good, right? And then in the mid 60s, and beginning in the mid 1950s, the Supreme Court was on the side of civil rights, the president was on the side of civil rights, and then finally Congress became on the side of civil rights. And we got real civil rights laws guaranteeing, in fact, legal equality of all Americans.
And you've said in past conversations that when all Americans are truly free and able to exercise their rights, this is my interpretation of what you said, really was fully manifested somewhere in the early 1970s. That's the time that it was equal to all, like the Declaration and
Yeah, I
Constitution
mean,
and Declaration. And
there are always going to be edge cases, but
sure,
yeah, by the 1990s, let's say,
but better than the
yeah,
1950s,
but there's
better than
always
the
and there was always
1930s.
progress. The 60s were
Right.
better than the 50s, and the
Yeah.
70s were better than the 60s. The only time I'd say that things got worse is in the 20 teens. So I think things got worse in the second Obama administration, and things have been getting worse since then. But generally speaking, things have been getting better. Um, but but to get back to my point, so after you achieve legal equality, there are still these problems that are not being solved by law. And so people came around and said, hey, we need to go beyond just legal equality and look at all of the areas in society where we still see racism. And I'm on board with that. That sounds good to me. I want to eradicate racism for everywhere. But when it goes too far, is when it says that no, what we must instill is a race consciousness among everybody. Now, the next thing is that as people started figuring this stuff out, they were like, well, sometimes people face multiple challenges in life, and which is true. And they
Which is
might be
true.
black and a woman, and they might be poor. And you say, yes, absolutely. I'm on board with acknowledging that distinction as well. But where it becomes uh, dangerous is when it becomes intersectionality, and you say, no, no, no. The new definition of intersectionality is that there is a hierarchy that we must impose, and you are not allowed to disagree with that. And the relentless uh, focus on how you decide this hierarchy is based on who has power. And so you must take the side of whoever is powerless, no matter who they are in every situation.
So
And so this is what sort of explains why um, you have a bunch of people who should not be supporting Hamas,
mm,
because they just say in this situation between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the Palestinians are the weaker party, therefore we must take their side and we have to accept every part of it. Right. Anyway, it,
so let me
this too is what we in California experience as what Yasha Monk calls the identity trap. This combination of beliefs that says you take the side of some group of people, uh, no one is allowed to dissent. There is a hierarchy. You must instill race consciousness, and you must use violence. And in all of these things, you are destroying the entire American system. You're destroying uh, every single aspect.
So you
Uh,
believe there's people that want to destroy America and make it more socialist or communist or Marxist. That's what they want. They truly want Marxism.
it's no, no, no. And this is why the Marxists and the socialists are often very critical of DEI. I mean, the identity, what we've just described is probably I would say, the majority belief among certain academic disciplines, um, and probably most media institutions. But it's not actually communism, it's not Marxism, and it's not really socialism. And that's
What is
why
it? What's the
often,
is?
I mean, that's why we use the term DEI. There's
Huh.
no other word to describe this combination of beliefs that people have right now. But real communists, like I said, real socialists, they would be the first ones to tell you that this isn't communism, this isn't socialism, that it's an entirely new.
Well, why culturally is it grouped together? I can show you 5 acquaintances that have accused me of being a communist Marxist because I'm at least willing to listen to DEI. I mean, I have
Well, I
lots of
mean,
posts on this.
yeah,
They just don't know what they're talking
you
about.
know, tell them to hang out with more Marxists, because there's nothing more pedantic than a Marxist. I mean, Marxists really know Marxism, and a lot
Okay,
of socialists really know socialism.
interesting.
So it's
Hang out
so
with
in
some
a way,
libertarians.
I mean, what I just told you was not something that I came up with, and it
Yeah, yeah,
didn't
yeah.
come from a conservative. It came from um, a guy who I think describes himself now as a liberal, but who was a socialist, and his parents were communists.
Interesting. So let me interrupt the conversation. Remember, I'd like you to talk about immigration here in a minute.
Yeah.
So, Bill, you've been a longtime friend of mine and a good acquaintance of the professors, but you've been absent for a couple months or a year or something. I don't know. Maybe occasionally join us, but we've missed you. So welcome back.
Thank you.
You are the impartial judge, jury and judge. I have an agenda, and I've had it for 40 years. I want freedom. I want people to live their life the way they want to live it. I'm a constitutional conservative with libertarian leanings, and I really haven't moved much out off that in 40 years. So I'm an advocate. I have an agenda. And I just heard Professor Tootle give the best explanation of something that can move me more towards Trump, unfortunately. And I don't want to move towards Trump.
Not my goal.
I know.
I
I know it
I'm
wasn't your
not
goal.
taking credit of that for that.
I know it wasn't your goal, but it does. You've been the best explainer of the animosity towards DEI that I've ever heard. So I have to pause and go, gosh, I'm learning something in today's episode. So thank you, Professor. Bart, but not Bart, Bill, you're the judge and jury. Tell me where I'm wrong. What are you hearing today? Do you just like, God, he's brilliant, or oh my God, he's off the deep end. He's a conservative quack professor. What is your thought? I don't want to plant either of those seeds. Bill, you've listened to this. What are you thinking of the conversation that Professor Tootle's advocating?
So I have two. I'll introduce one thought that I have. Actually, I've got two, I guess, with respect to this. Number one, um, I mean, I am growing to a position where I'm blaming the Democratic Party more and more and more for our current situation than I am Trump.
Oh, so you agree with some of my recent stuff that have all my liberal friends mad at me?
Absolutely do, and it's been the extreme elements of the Democratic Party to me that have caused a lot of this. Biden um, ran on a campaign to temper all that. I think he got elected in part because people believed that he would continue to temper those extreme elements. And then he,
That's why I voted for him.
yeah, I felt comfortable with that. And then he didn't follow through. He didn't follow through with being the caretaker president, the bridge. I mean, he didn't follow through with any of that. And so we have, people who tilted toward Trump who resisted his ideas, to begin with. That's number one. Number two, with respect to DEI, I'm really, really trying to tune in on this issue. And I have to admit, I'm confused. I think the label, just like so many other issues that have come before us, the label begins to dominate instead of the ideas and problems and mixture of good things and bad things behind the label. And DEI just seems to be the latest one. You could go back to Black Lives Matter. You can go back to critical race theory. I use diversity and inclusion all the time in my consulting work with my business owner clients because the fact is they have diversity in their workforce and they have to work on effective inclusion in order to get all the deal with the complexities of people from diverse backgrounds working effectively together. That's not DEI as we've been discussing here. It does use the words diversity and inclusion very purposefully. Stephen, I've heard you talk about the loyalty or the pledges that professors are asked to take, and I mean the essays you have to write, and I mean all that stuff. I mean, I didn't know all that until I heard it from you, and that's like a huge red flag. It's like, what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, you can't be hired,
Right,
voted,
right,
tenured,
right.
and in your evaluation.
So I guess I'll leave the challenge at this. When people say they're for DEI or against DEI, I kind of want them to show their work. What do you mean exactly? Because I don't think most people would be against every single objective of a well-crafted DEI program. John, you've talked about in the past how, we've gone through, these these training sessions in a corporate setting and so forth, and people come away and they you go to the hallway and you gripe about it like that's a waste of time. I don't see why we're doing this, but yet some ideas rub off. You actually learn things,
Yeah.
right? I would imagine that some DEI programs, whether it was by Target or any of these other organizations, were probably a mixture of uh, effective and helpful and maybe kind of dumb. Um, but fix it. I mean,
Yeah.
uh,
And Bill, remember your comments now. Let me interrupt as well.
yes, thank you.
Professor Tootle, I remember this vividly. Walking with a former two-star general. His name's Bud Ahern. I think he's still around. And it was just the two of us in the hallway of a company called CH2M Hill that now merged within some other company. I think it's Jacobson. But it was founded by 7 white guys in California, all engineers. And it grew to be the world's largest privately held engineering company, 17,000 employees worldwide. And it was just Bud and I walking along. We were planning an event with the governor that was going to visit. And we walked by this poster, and it said, Hispanic engineering group. And then the next one was women in engineering, and the next one was gays for good engineering. Or, there's like 7 or 8 different posters. And I paused because I was kind of surprised, because they were conservative engineer men. And I go, what's the deal? How come you're so adamant about having all this? And he goes, oh, this is so simple, John. We want to do business. And if we're in South America or Dubai or in Eastern Europe, we need to have our engineers look like the people that are going to contract with us. So we have a huge this is a business decision. We want to win contracts, and we're going to hire people that reflect the taxpayers of whatever jurisdiction that we're working in. That's it. And I go, of course you do. That way you all make more money. So now tie Bill's point about how he works with clients. What I just demonstrated with CH2M Hill, they're out of business now, or they're merged, so it doesn't matter anymore. And with what you're talking about on how we as citizens should treat each other, what laws should we expect, and what culture should we expect?
Well, I would just say, here's why this is such a hard issue for a regular person to understand. Because actual diversity, actual equality, and actual inclusion are actually the source of all of America's strength, all of America's power, all of America's success. But this other thing
Okay.
that people are calling, who are using those words, this this stew that needs a new name, that says that the definition of diversity is no diversity, that the definition
Okay.
of equity is inequality, and that the definition of inclusion is exclusion. Like, just because they use those words, it makes it confusing, which is
Okay.
why. So, and then get back to a point that that Bart made probably a few months ago.
You mean Bill?
No,
Oh, no, Bart Miller. Okay.
yeah, Bart Miller made in a previous show where he was sort of asking, how do they do this in California? And I said, well, it's because they make the law legal, and then they point to definitions being held somewhere else. In other words, we're going to say, oh, but we're going to leave it up to the chancellor's office to define these terms. And then the chancellor's office defines diversity as being a lack of diversity, defines equity as being the opposite of equity, and the chancellor's office defines inclusion as a lack of inclusion. So it's very clever to have named your belief system the opposite of what it is. It's like Nazis calling themselves the Freedom Party or something,
So you truly do think it's Orwellian? It is a intentional Orwellian agenda.
I mean, I can't tell you what it's like to sit in a room full of people who say words that mean the opposite of what they mean.
Fascinating. Bill, is this convincing you any? I mean, not that you need to be convinced, but I'm trying to take a second viewpoint of my own, because I know I'm going to have some friends watch this, and they're just going to go, no, I'm for DEI. And there's people that are truly scared. I have a trans daughter, or I have a Hispanic son-in-law. I have a black friend, they're gonna put their own world's view into this and go BS. They're scared and they're all being eliminated. Now they're fearful in society, and that's not the America I believe in. And so I'm trying to put, not that you need to say that, Bill, but I'm trying to help people think through these difficult issues. And I'm not. You're convincing me, hooray! But I'm not sure you're convincing 40% of my friends. So what? I guess, or what? Tell me, Bill. Do you have a reaction to that? Do you think he's just overwhelmingly convincing?
Uh, I'm not really sure of your question,
Yeah, me
John.
neither.
Uh, are
Uh,
you asking if Trump is convincing?
No, you,
Or
if you're
me?
convincing.
that
Um,
that yeah, um, I think Professor Tootle's extremely convincing in sort of unpacking and getting to greater specificity about what we should be careful about, what we're for or what we're against,
Yeah, I love that.
if that
So, but
makes
but Bill,
sense.
you have been very thoughtful. You've been passionate about supporting diverse interests. I've formed a couple different groups, and you've been weighing in and admiring and supporting people with different diversity, equity, inclusion ideas. You've talked about your past career in a major industry and what you did. I mean, so I'm not accusing you of having a dual position, but you've been very passionate on helping people succeed. Haven't in diversity, equity, inclusion kind of things. Have you not?
I've tried, and I'm really glad that you brought up General
Ahern.
Ahern. I remember I met him because of you. He hasn't been around. I don't know, you know,
Hope he's
what his
okay. I
character.
haven't seen him recently either.
Yeah, it's probably been 10 years since I've seen him, but um, great example. I mean, you businesses have reasons to have a diverse business reasons um, to have a diverse workforce. And if they have a diverse workforce, they have business reasons to make sure that it's both individually and collectively successful. And that they have, pay policies that treat everybody fairly, and promote people based um, on merit within that diverse structure. So, uh,
and we can demonstrate this over and over again, right? Your company will, even if it's not about let's assume that somebody might hear this and think, oh, you're talking about pandering to an audience will sometimes, be good for business. But I would actually go further and say, no, it's the authentic embracing of actual diversity that will
yeah,
benefit your business. Because
Yeah.
and
what you're
I'm
allowing
and
people
I'm
to do is be the best version of themselves within your organization. And I'm not against that. I'm for, not only am I not against it, I would say it's my life mission to be for that.
and just in heated agreement, Stephen, what frustrates me, Target seems to be the latest, hot button issue, and and maybe McDonald's, that came up in a post exchange or a Facebook exchange, John, that you had. But what frustrates me is the CEO of Target should be talking in these terms instead of just sending out a press release that, we've terminated our DEI programs. That's causing me an intense frustration because that CEO should be out leading and defending what is right about what they are trying to accomplish, whether no matter what you call it. And if upon reflection that programming needs to be changed in order to reflect legitimate and correct legitimate criticisms that they might have, and maybe he learns that from his own employees. Um, but just to cave and say, this, I don't want this political heat that the Trump administration is going to put on me, and it could affect, I mean, I don't know if they supply the federal government, but I don't know what contracts they might have that maybe they're trying to protect. But this is kind of gets back to my question last week about, the role of business. I think business has to stand up for what's right that is threatened, as opposed to just caving.
So Professor, that's the other reason I wanted to do this more in-depth conversation on this today, because you have said that if you want, last week I think it was, if you want real change, you don't just pass a law or executive orders, because they'll just get rescinded from the next administration. If you want real change, you got to convince people. You got to culturally, what Bill said, you got to talk about these issues, and then not only will we change the law, but they'll have staying power. Sorry to have a lousy
Yeah.
memory of what you said, but it's something similar, right?
Yeah, and I always think that, Eisenhower was maybe the best example of this when it came to moving people on civil rights, because every time that Eisenhower described civil rights, he would say, and of course we shouldn't discriminate against um, things as inconsequential as race and religion. And you say, why is he mentioning religion every time? And it's because most Americans already agreed that you should not discriminate on the basis of religion. So he was coupling it with something that people already embraced. And the idea is, how do you bring along every reasonable person with you? How do you actually change a culture? And then how do you follow that up with laws that actually reflect the best version of the culture? I mean, because here's the other thing is that, you know, um, laws are the ultimate example of, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. Like, you can pass a bunch of laws, but if nobody follows it, it's going to fall apart in fact. Um, but it can create a structure where the better version of Americans can emerge. And that's what political leadership is supposed to do. It's supposed to say, okay, well, what's the best version of you? What's the best version of American ideals and the American founding? And how can we build on that and get you to take the next step towards understanding why you need to protect the rights of people who aren't like you, because that's something that needs to be taught. You don't have to teach people to, take things for themselves, or, root for their own team. You have to teach people why it's important to protect the rights of people who aren't like you.
Love that. Our basic American system. A superficial, and then one more deep one, and then we'll see what we've missed either through you or Bill. The superficial, I differ again back on your speed limit, just as we don't need to talk about this much. But among my friends, you set the speed limit for 45, and people either are going to go 49 or 54, either 4 miles over or 9 miles over. And I admit that if they're going 15 or 20 miles over, that person's really dangerous. I mean, they take them off the road. But you're going 4 or 9 miles over, cool. You're moderate or a little bit of a risk taker. I don't think you're a lawbreaker. I know that's superficial. Sorry, we should all obey the law. Okay. Any reaction to that?
My
Yeah,
number is 7.
7?
yeah. So most, speed cameras are accurate to within about, 10%.
Yeah.
So usually if you're within 10% of the speed limit, you're fine.
Right, which is why we either go 4 or 9 or 7, or we don't
Yeah.
follow the law.
I'll just admit that when the speed limit is 65, I punch in the cruise control at 71.
Right, no one
Um,
follows the law, right, unless you're really old or can't see well or you're hyper
I,
scared. Yeah,
but I use my adaptive cruise control, so I'm just
right,
always with the flow of traffic.
cool. Now, on a deeper issue, please do take a couple minutes on immigration, because I truly am thinking we're making the wrong path by building 30,000, if that's true, 30,000 rooms for the bad guys in Guantanamo. Really, we're going to put 30,000 illegal immigrants in Guantanamo? Yikes! Um, that may actually be okay if they're truly, some gang member, violent criminal, but I'd rather them go to some other country. But I am truly worried about dreamers. And I'm also concerned about the folk who's been here for 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years illegally. And they are out there. I can tell you people I know that are illegal that have been here 50 years, and everyone they know is an American citizen. But we're going to take, I mean, their kids, their grandkids, their wife, and they're 70 years old, and we're going to deport that person? Really? Now, I am also surprised that some of my more liberal friends do think it's a fundamental right to, once you're here. My congressman, I think, has directly said that. Jason Crow, and our mayor in Denver has said that these people are part of our community, and making no distinguishment whether they came here yesterday or last year and have any community connections at all. They want to protect everybody in America. Well, that's not me, but I do think there's some bridge between me and them, that there's some rational policy that I don't think that every single person's a criminal and has to be deported. Can you give us some distinctions here from the historical angle, what we as citizens should think about legally and culturally, to put some method to the madness in this change of culture that the president seems to want? Can you be wise for us?
Well, I mean, the big answer is that we need to have an immigration policy that is actually enforceable and that somehow reflects what our actual values are. And the real, uh, you know, I mean, I wish we just had a statesman in office, because what needs to happen is that what a statesman could do on an issue like immigration is lead a national conversation about what is immigration, and get everybody to agree what's it for and how many should it be and what should the rules be. And statesmanship would involve talking a little bit and listening a lot and saying, okay, what we need to figure out what is it that 80% of Americans, because I think it's one of those issues that if we actually had a long national conversation about what immigration is for, I think we would find out that about 80% of Americans have maybe the same basic idea on it, immigration. And then pass that law and then actually enforce it. Because what we have now is essentially a system where some people are saying we shouldn't have any laws, I guess, and what we should, I don't know what
You're basically saying that, yes.
Yeah, or we shouldn't have an immigration system. That's got to be a minority position that,
I think it's the dominant position within the Democratic Party now. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure
But
it's the dominant position.
what we need to do is we need to get a Democrat on here to see if there's, and this is maybe going to sound bad, but I've never spoken to someone who, after you ask them sort of three questions, knows the answer to the fourth one. In that you ask them, like, should we have an immigration policy? And then they'll have a bunch of talking points. And you say,
Yeah.
okay, should we have an immigration policy? I need to hear someone actually say what enforceable immigration policy they would actually advocate for, and what are the underlying principles behind it. Because I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard anyone say what they're for and why.
Okay, so it's a professional distinction on that, which is why I wanted to have this conversation. You're right, and it's not doublethink or double speak. It's just a different way of speaking. It's a artful dodge, maybe. They say all people have value. All people are working part of our community, and we
Concede,
need to
all people
protect.
have value. Yes, they're part of our community. Now,
And we need to protect
question.
them.
Okay, we need to protect them. Now answer the question. Now answer the question of what enforceable immigration policy you would be willing to advocate, right? Concede all of those points and get to the part where you answer my question. What enforceable immigration policy do you advocate?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Those are the three questions, or there's more?
Well, I would just keep asking it until they came up with an answer. But the thing is, they'll give you a spin the first time you ask, and they'll give you a spin the second time you ask, and they'll give
Okay.
you a spin the
I think I
third
got you.
time you ask.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And I
and then finally they'll
demonstrated.
say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
they'll find some way of conceding that they have no idea.
Do you
Yeah.
concur from a decent human beingness, from an American patriot status, and whatever else you'd want to describe me? I mean, those would be self-descriptive. I'm a decent human being. I'm a patriot. I want to protect dreamers and some other folks. I'm not positive how far and willing. I don't know. I need to be part of that national discussion. Is that a noble deal, or should we just get rid of them
Yeah,
all
I'm willing
first?
to say what I'm for with
Yeah,
regard
tell me what you're for, because I
Yeah,
might be in favor
here's
of
what
what
I'm
you're saying.
for. You take every one of these decent people and you come up with some system of figuring out how to let them stay in the country. Like, if they are decent, nice, kind, law-abiding people who want to become American citizens, I'm pretty much. And here's the other thing. I look at it like, there are a lot of people around the world who say they would be willing to move here and and immigrate here. But here we got like the people who are willing, like they the who they've already proven it. They've, if somebody's been here for a long time and they've been working and following the laws and being good citizens and believing, like in essence, like, to
But
me,
they're also, Professor, they're also human, and they've sped some time, or they had a minor fender bender, or
sure.
they've
And
done.
this is why, like, we need again, this is the intersection of law and culture and politics, which is just apply a little dose of common sense. I mean, you can't tell the difference between somebody who sped and somebody who, like, poured boiling water on a woman. Like, I can
Right.
tell the difference. And don't insult the intelligence of the American people by, by pretending that we don't know the difference between somebody who sped or,
So you
misfiled their taxes one year or
So
something.
you fundamentally, and I don't mean to pitch you against the Trump administration, because that's not your goal, but on just this point that the press secretary made, that if they've come into our country illegally, they are a criminal and must be deported.
Well,
You
they have
fundamentally
broken the.
disagree with that,
I mean, here's like, um, boy, uh, y- if you have broken the law, if you overstayed your visa, that
right?
is technically and legally true.
That's true. So
Right?
they're a
And you
criminal,
are being factually accurate when you state that. Now, whether or not you are a criminal, you know, like, I think that goes beyond a legal definition, and it involves, like, taking into account somebody's entire life. If you if I look at somebody's, you know uh, a 10-year span of their lives, and I say, you keep getting arrested for stealing, you keep getting arrested and convicted for assault, uh, I would say you are now a criminal because you have exhibited a pattern of behavior over a period of time, and I have no problem at all giving you the label of criminal, because what you do is you do crime. That's
right?
what somebody who does crime is a criminal, and that shouldn't be that hard for somebody to spit those words out. However, someone who has made a mistake, somebody who has been desperate, somebody who's had a bad day, right? That person is not a criminal. That person is someone who, through the course of their own lives, lived a life that we all have lived. you know, we've all had bad days. I've had many friends who ended up doing
Right.
things that can harm others because they had a bad day that day, you know, but that doesn't define their entire lives. It's not their
Yeah.
identity.
So,
So,
Bill, do you accept all this? I want to be active. I want to make a difference. I want to be a good citizen for the next decade until we solve this problem that seems unsolvable since Reagan's last success on this issue. It's been what, 40-ish years since we've had that national conversation. Bill, where are you? Can you help out on this? And then Professor, you get the last word.
So I'm jumping back to your comment, Professor Tootle, about Ulysses Grant. And look, I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts floating around. You're from California, you're from the San Joaquin Valley. I mean, how much of where we are is because the last time that our immigration laws were updated? I mean, I can't say that I even know what the laws are and how they conflict with each other, how the policy was crafted in ways that are not coherent and produce, different actions in different circumstances that work against each other. So if we had actually had a president who took the last immigration set of policies to heart, and like Grant said, this is what I'm going to enforce,
Yeah.
what would it have produced in the way of, no, we can't, we can't function in California, we can't process our crops, we
Oh,
can't
but that
feed.
isn't it. I don't mean to compliment Trump to be like Grant, but isn't that exactly what he's doing?
Yeah, but it's way too late. Now we have ethical concerns because you know, we've welcomed all these people to work under the radar. We're depending on them. We've let them have kids and attend our schools, and so it's not right that we try to impose the law as exactly as it's written today, because it's immoral. And we're doing some things like that in other areas too, like the Afghanistan's that we depended on, and partnered with and vowed to protect, that we're now leaving out in the cold. Those are terrible things.
Okay, Professor, you get the last word. Very
Yeah,
helpful.
I would just to say I agree. And a few years back, the Cato Institute put out a graphic to demonstrate how the American immigration system works, and it was like a giant poster. It is almost impossible to follow the law. My sister got married a few years ago to someone who was uh, a foreign national, and even the process of them getting married and bringing him here, it took years and lawyers and thousands of dollars. And following the law shouldn't require a lawyer. And that means that what Bill said is true.
Okay. So we need more deep thinkers and less bumper sticker politics on this issue.
Yeah. And what's funny is if somebody like, um, you know, let's say in an alternate universe where Elon Musk was like um, just the good version of Elon Musk,
Yeah.
and you said to him like, okay, you don't get to come up with what the policy is, but your job is to make it so that someone can immigrate to the United States without money and quickly. What would you do? Design that system. Um, and it would be interesting to see what somebody who trained in sort of human-centered design and
Yeah, system
software
engineering
would,
stuff.
would come up with, yeah, to make it a policy that could actually uh, prioritize who gets in, and create a system for integrating people into the United States.
And to your point, Stephen, we've never done that hard work.
Right, that would be work. Yeah, it's much easier to just sling cliches at one another.
Okay. Are you pessimistic or optimistic regarding how we treat each other as humans in our current environment? Are we on the right path? The doomsday clock, is it advanced or receded in the last year?
I'm not going to say that it's that I'm optimistic until um, every branch of government is devoted to preserving the republic.
Love that. I love that answer. You still deferred though. Yeah. What would you tell? I have more liberal friends than you do, and I know you're a college professor in
I don't know
California.
why you would say that. I have you have no idea who my friends are here, and I have I mean I would say I can count the number of conservative friends that I have on one hand.
Okay, fair enough. We're equal then. I
Yeah.
will tell you, at least my liberal friends, I think they're a little melodramatic. I think they're a little doomsayer. I think they're a little pessimistic. I think they're a little, but they are off the deep end in fear. I have really
Yeah.
thoughtful people that send me
All of my
private
friends
messages.
are spiraling into deep depression
Yeah,
and
I mean,
fear. All of them.
real,
Yes.
authentic. They're not making it up. It's not for political reasons. They truly are
No.
in fear.
Yes, that is happening to one. It seems like 100% of
Okay, so what do we tell
the-
our liberal friends to be an empath? I mean, they're friends. They're not some stranger, mean jerk. They're not some Marxists. They're liberals, but then they're true friends. What do we? How do we be good friends to them, Professor?
well, when somebody's truly spiraling, there's almost nothing you can tell them.
Okay, we can't help those people, but
Yeah,
how about everybody else we know? I mean, come
but w- what you the only way to really help somebody is to sort of walk them towards a path of recognizing reality. So I've found that the only thing that's really helpful is that when somebody says, "Oh, Trump's doing this," or "This is what I'm afraid of," I say, "Well, um, how is that happening?" And they'll say, "Oh, what?" And I'll say, "Well, how would you know if X, Y, or Z is happening?" And they say, "Oh, I read about it on this article." It's like, "Well, can we verify that somewhere that it's actually happening? Is that what the article really said?" I said, "Let's look at it." And then you read it and you're like, "Oh, it doesn't actually say that." Or if it links to something else, you go, "Oh, this doesn't act." Okay, so what was your next concern? And after you walk them through that, they realize maybe I've just been falling victim to one clickbait headline after another, and putting these things together in a way that is leading to my spiraling depression. But you can't tell them that. What
Right.
you have to do is you have to let them do the research on every single one of these things, but then they will eventually recognize the pattern of what they're doing.
It's interesting that you say it in that way because I think I'm, without you giving that advice, I think, and I've taken a slightly version of that myself. I want to protect dreamers. I really do. I think all of them should be put on some legal status. I prefer a path to citizenship, but I think it's rational that they were kids. They didn't break the law at all. They don't have the mens rea to break the law. They were kids brought here of not of their own choosing.
But Bill, just to bring, I want to mention something to Bill on that specific issue. There was a Dreamer Act that the Republicans put forward,
Yep.
and it was the Democrats who killed it
Yep.
because they wanted to have it as an issue in the next election.
They both do that. Both sides
The
do that
both
all
of
the
They
them,
time.
yeah,
both
It's
both sides are
and
doing
they
that.
poison pilled that bill
yep.
back and forth. And um, and when I specifically mentioned it to multiple Republican congressmen who were in very high leadership positions then and now,
Yep.
they all blame Democrats for getting in the way of the passage of the Dream Act.
Yep.
Um,
And so, Professor, when I see the press secretaries that say they're all criminals, period, by definition, and need to be deported, I balance that with the effect that I want to protect dreamers. And thus far, with all the free media, and there's still a ton of it, maybe not mainstream as powerful, there is a ton of media, everybody's media these days. I want to hear when a dreamer has been, if they have legal papers through the Dream Act, through the process, and I want to hear when they are deported, not involuntarily. Maybe,
well, I'll tell you right now, I've got 4 to 6 of my own students who are going through this right now.
wait, being deported?
They're going through some sort of legal process to um, hopefully prevent themselves from being deported.
Good. I think that's very wise of them to do so. But I want to know if they're all of a sudden get yanked out of that process and be deported involuntarily. That's going to be the tipping point, I think, that will have the conversation that we got to fix this. That's my own opinion. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, that's true. But I also remember a few years ago, I had a student who was essentially putting her own life on hold to handle her mother's legal issues. And her mother had not taken advantage of the amnesty
Yeah,
twice. And you're just like, oh my gosh,
right.
2 times she said she didn't want to become an American citizen, and now she says that she does, and her poor daughter is having to. And I have had students. I mean, it's funny. I have a friend who I was sitting next to him yesterday at 5 p.m., but I don't want to identify who he is. But
Locating.
yeah, but both of his parents were deported when he was a kid.
Wow.
And both came back afterwards, and are now both citizens. But you can't yes, so far, and there are activist groups monitoring this up and down everywhere. I mean, every single day at my college, it's a new, legal aid seminar for, bring your parents type. This is happening every single day. So there is no way that it could happen without me knowing pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I just think that's the ethical right thing to do to be engaged in this issue. But I wish people would try to do it in an effective way instead of just criticizing Trump or I just don't, or calling him a fascist or something. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why they don't actually want to go and talk to a lawyer or go volunteer if they want. I don't know. It just seems like people would do things that are effective rather than keyboard
But
warrior.
the minimum thing that we should be requiring of all of our politicians is say what you are for. Like, stop telling me, what you're against, and get past the talking points and just tell me what you would be willing to back that and enforce. And you wouldn't be out there protesting when it's enforced either. Like, tell me what you're for.
Okay, that's a helpful end today. Any last calls, Bill or Professor, that you wish we would have talked about on this generalized subject between law and culture? I know you thought we were going to talk about something different. Sorry. Um,
No, it's
anything?
nice to it's nice to hear from Bill. Yeah,
Yeah, it
it was
really
a great
was.
Well,
contribution.
I
Yeah,
thought this was great.
you're a great addition, Bill. Thank you for. We want you every week, so come back.
Yeah, I can
I
make
know.
some and
To ski with,
I know.
I can make
Okay.
some and I can't make some, but I really appreciate what this is all about.
Yeah, appreciate you, Professor. Great job. Thanks. More to
Much.
follow.
Yep. Take care, guys.
Have a good day.